Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the place-based peer learning session on the National Year of Reading 2026. We're thrilled that you could join us this afternoon. As you can see, we are recording the session. So if you want to look at the session afterwards or cascade it to colleagues, there'll be a link sent probably next week and you'll be able to access it, and it'll also be on our website. So that's a place-based peer learning, but it's our website is artsandculturepeerlearning.org.uk. So I'm Kate Parkin from the Place-Based Peer Learning Programme, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by 4 colleagues. They are David Heyman, Jason Vitt, and Sarah Bird from the National Literacy Trust, and they'll introduce themselves. We're also thrilled to be joined by a kind of case study in practice, and that's Daniel Tyler McTighe from Barrowful in Cumbria, in Barrow. So there's 4 speakers today. The session will run for an hour and a half. We'll probably have about half an hour, 40 minutes first, then have a short interval, so a refreshment break, and then we'll have following speakers from Jason and Daniel, and then a Q&A, so you can ask questions at the end. And in terms of Q&A, you're welcome to put your hand up, but it might be easier to put information in the chat, and then I will be able to read those out to colleagues and they can answer those questions. So without further ado, thank you very much. And hello, David.
Thanks, Kate. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having us all today. So I'm David Heyman. I'm the director of the National Year of Reading. And as Kate says, we're going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour on the campaign's background, how we're working particularly in communities and our place-based work, and then our plans for legacy of the campaign as well. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen right now. Hopefully this should all work. There we go. I hope everyone can see that okay. So what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to give a brief overview of the campaign. We're then going to have a short break, as Kate says. We're going to have a deep dive of our work in communities led by Jason, Sarah and Daniel. I'll reflect on some of the progress to date and our priorities for the future for the campaign, and then open up for questions. So just a quick snapshot of the campaign. The National Year of Reading was commissioned by the Department for Education last year, and it's supported by a range of cross-sector partners. And we'd say it's a once-in-a-generation campaign designed to reverse the decade-long trends in declines in reading and reading for pleasure. And why are we doing this? Well, I think at its heart is the fact that just 1 in 3 children say they enjoy reading, with daily reading falling to under 20%. This decline is sharpest among boys, teenagers and low-income families. So we feel that there's a real crisis around reading, and particularly reading for pleasure. So the National Year of Reading is a behaviour change campaign focused on making reading more relevant and enjoyable, engaging new audiences and delivering in-depth work in schools, communities, libraries and workplaces all across the UK. The core components of the campaign, well, I think firstly, it's really important to say we've got 900 partners aligned around a shared theory of change. And that's not just a theory of change for the next 12 months. It's one which lasts over the next decade as well, to really reverse these significant trends in declining reading for pleasure. It has 3 main elements to our work. The first is a big public-facing behaviour change campaign, which I'll go into a bit more detail about, which is all about repositioning reading as something modern, social, relevant and accessible to people all across the UK. But we know that public-facing campaigns aren't enough, and so our work also involves deep interventions in schools, in early years settings, in libraries, in prisons and communities, where we support readers, we support reading practitioners, and we support the families and communities around readers to change the culture and change practice on the ground in every part of the UK. And Jason will talk more about that later. And then underpinning these are shared resources so that anyone, anywhere can pick up and run with the campaign in a way which feels right for them. So that is a brand toolkit, that's a website with advice, guidance, reading recommendations. It's a calendar of shared activity, it's messaging, which anyone can run with, and it's shared research and data looking at trends, patterns, and behaviors around reading, what's working, what isn't, and how we can all help encourage reading in our communities. So they're the three components. And as I mentioned right from the start, there's a real focus on legacy and systemic long-term change for the campaign. We know national years of anything are important, valuable, and we hope to have a real impact over the next 6 months and the 12 months total. But we also know that's not enough. So we need to be focusing on legacy and systemic change as well. The key principles underpinning the campaign are fivefold. First is local to national, and I've already touched on this, but we really want our delivery work to be rooted in communities, schools, and libraries, locally led, tailored to individual contexts, much like the work that the people on this call will be driving, and really, really linked and integrated into local communities. We then want to scale that through regional infrastructure and national campaigns as well. So there's a real local to national flavour to it. We want everything to be insight and evidence-led. The campaign has been based around research over the past decade from the National Literacy Trust, looking at over 100,000 people and reading patterns and behaviours every year. This annual literacy survey is at the core of our work, and we continue to do new insights and evidence-led information to inform what we're doing. We want to be creative and disruptive, and I'll show you a bit about the campaign shortly, which I hope helps position reading in a more bold and culturally relevant way. Really importantly, we want to be amplifying existing programs. The National Year of Reading isn't about creating 6 or 7 new reading initiatives and delivering those. It's about scaling and supporting proven programs which are already out there and helping to deliver. And finally, while this is a national campaign, we also want it to reach new audiences and make reading fun, accessible, modern, and socially relevant. Our priority audience for the campaign, as we've worked on with the DFE, are threefold. So first, teenage boys. Second, parents with children under 5. And third, families from disadvantaged backgrounds. And this is because, well, this is a national challenge. These are demographics with the most acute issues. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the public campaign, how the campaign is looking, feeling, and showing up at a national level. And first, a bit of the strategy and background. So I guess our approach to constructing the campaign has been looking at our characters, our audiences, the challenges they're facing, the settings in which they live and go about their lives, and the resolutions that we think can help change these patterns. So just from a kind of audience perspective, there's one common thread that's coming out in our research and analysis, that reading has increasingly been seen as a chore. So for parents, it's been seen as a chore in terms of the pressures to have to read to their children when they're in already busy lives. For boys aged 10 to 16, it's something that is being seen as associated with homework rather than joy. And for disadvantaged families, again, a pressure around obligation in reading. It's being increasingly being chorified and seen as work, homework, or parental work. And so that is a key issue we want to overcome, that perception that reading is a chore. Second, reading has fallen out of step with our culture in lots of ways, and some of the drivers behind that we'd see are, one, that we're hooked on instant gratification or snackable content, whereas reading is perceived as too long form. Second, culture is driven by a search for social connection. We're increasingly trying to find connections and bond within our community, but reading is seen, and I would argue incorrectly, but it's seen as a solitary act. It's seen as something you do in isolation, away from your culture and your community. Third, in a world where our leisure time is increasingly precious to us and there's increasing pressures on our leisure time, reading has become associated with work, not play. And so therefore, when we're thinking about how we allocate our leisure time, why would we allocate it to something which we feel is a chore rather than something we feel is joyful? And so that perception is key to the campaign. And And lastly, our devices are becoming the entry point for all our content. And as a result, reading is vanishing from view. We're seeing it less on buses, and we're seeing it less on the TV, and we're seeing it less in advertising campaigns. It's less visible tangibly within culture. So the third element we wanted to call out is that there's a clear kind of value to action gap, that whilst people understand the benefits of reading, they're still reading even less. So while we understand that reading may be good for our careers, or it may be good for us at school, or it may be good for families, it's not motivating enough to act, because it's often seen as slow or solitary or studious. So we understand the benefits of reading, but we're not translating those benefits into action. So our approach for the campaign is to transition away from a conversation around the long-term benefits of reading to immediate wins, how you can get joy right now. Transition it from being seen as a standalone, solitary activity into something which integrates and links to our passions. Something which is seen as interruptive, that we step away from our lives and go to somewhere separate to read, to something that is continuous, ongoing, and integrated. Fourth, trying to position it away from being a solo escape, something we do on our own, away from our friends or family or community, into something which provides social grease, which enables us to share and communicate and be part of a wider community. And lastly, taking reading away from a specific, distinct world of reading to where we think culture is, and be that sport or TV or film or gaming. It's showing the interlinkages between reading of our already existing cultural passions. And so that's the kind of strategic proposition. If you're into it, read into it, and the kind of thinking behind our goal and campaign. And hopefully I'll be able to show you a quick video now, which just sums up the campaign in action.
Oh, David, we can't hear it. Is it possible for you just to change the audio settings, or I think my video setting?
Yes, let me try and do that. Do you know what? I will send this round afterwards, so everyone can have a feel of it. And we've got some images which hopefully bring it to life in a different way. So here are some of the kind of the visuals associated with the campaign, which, as I mentioned, are all about trying to position reading as something integrated into our existing passions. So here you've got a teenage boy who's clearly mad about football, reading even deeper into it by reading matchday articles or programs from the game, or biographies, or insights into his favorite players and teams. You've got someone who's really interested in horror, going all in on their passions through reading Dracula. Somebody's interested in fantasy, reading about those kind of books. A family set up between a parent and a daughter. Showcase of how reading can link into other passions, be that gardening or cycling or fashion as well. It's really positioning reading as a build and a deep dive into the things you already love. Similarly with music, you haven't heard a song until you've read into it, encouraging people to go really deep into their favorite lyrics behind the favorite songs or artists. And yes, so here's just a few ways that the campaign is being visually showing up across the UK. How we're getting that message out there, it's through brand and partner amplifications, through PR and media executions. We're getting campaign ambassadors out there, so that can be authors or sports people or musicians talking about the stories which shape their journeys. We're aligning reading with cultural moments. Excuse me, we've just done a brilliant campaign over the summer about the summer of sport, which is telling the stories behind the sporting stars or tournaments or sports happening over the summer, from Wimbledon to the Commonwealth Games to the World Cup. We're doing organic social media, and then we're putting out ads across radio, TV, cinema, and out of home as well. So we're really trying to change the conversation and position reading under this goal in brand. So that's a bit about the public-facing campaign, and then I'll just touch briefly on some of our work in library, schools, and communities. But Jason and Sarah will really go into this in more detail afterwards. So in terms of libraries engagement, a big part of our work, we are working with the Reading Agency as a core partner to support, enable and encourage libraries all over the UK to continue their brilliant work in this space. And so how we're working with them is comms and activity toolkits that are being distributed to all 3,000 libraries in England and Wales. We've got goal in branding and assets being specifically designed with library messaging, which are popping up in libraries in all over the UK. It's one of my favourite things is walking past a library or a bookshop at the moment and seeing the goal in banners and bunting and libraries in library windows and on the shelves. We're doing work around Discovery and Library Day to showcase how libraries are activating National Year of Reading. We're working with schools and the links between schools and libraries to make sure there's a really clear tie-up there. And we're doing a lot of communications and resource distribution across the library network as well. So libraries are a fundamental part of the campaign, and we want to be supporting them, build capacity, and supporting sign-ups to libraries all around the UK. In schools and early years settings, we're delivering a year-long programme of activity, which is designed to both support early years practitioners and teachers build capacity around reading for pleasure, as well as encourage and inspire children as well. So we do that through national author events where we go into the schools and broadcast out to hundreds of thousands of students at a time, and national assemblies which tell the story of the campaign and show the linkages between areas that children are interested in and reading, be that music or sport or TV. And this is a picture from an event we did for World Book Day with Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club, which was the great big footy bookie quiz where we had almost 1 million students taking part for that. We deliver training webinars for practitioners. We do practical classroom tools and guides on reading for pleasure, so teachers are prepared and supported in this. And we work across the sector to advocate for a bigger focus on reading for pleasure within the classroom. So there's a year-long programme of activity taking place in schools up and down the country. We're also trying to recruit 100,000 new volunteers to come on board to support the campaign, both deliver in 2026 and also be a core part of the legacy. We know that we as one organisation, or even the 900 partners I mentioned at the start, aren't enough to change reading culture on their own. And so we want to be empowering and supporting volunteers all over the UK to deliver the campaign. The slightly strange picture you can see on the right is an event we had to celebrate volunteers at the British Library where the Queen and Paddington turned up, and it was a wonderful moment to showcase how volunteers are driving reading activities all around the UK and encourage more sign-ups, and also have a slice of giant marmalade sandwich cake. And so we're doing volunteering in schools, in workplaces, in communities and online, really trying to fit volunteering opportunities to people's interests and their availability and capacity. Lots of community activation underway, and I'll kind of just skim over this because I know Jason will talk in more detail about that. And then partnerships. So as I've touched on, partnerships are actually absolutely core to the campaign, and we see those in different ways. So we've got core delivery partners who are helping deliver in schools, nurseries and libraries, and that includes the Reading Agency and Book Trust and World Book Day and school readers and a range of brilliant organisations working in this space. We're also supported by some of our funders and sponsors who help provide the scale and reach for the campaign. And that includes organisations from Spotify to the Premier League to Amazon, all the way down to pledge partners who have proactively decided to embed reading in their everyday activities. And that ranges from Stratford-upon-Avon Food Bank to Spitalfield City Farm. Organisations big and small, many of whom have no connection to reading or it's not a focus of their activities, but recognise the importance of the campaign and want to make sure they're embedding reading activities in their organisation's work over the National Year of Reading. So a real brilliant nationwide spread and scale of partners helping support us on the campaign. And then I think lastly, from the campaign side, it's also looking at government advocacy. So we've got a really strong relationship with the DfE who have commissioned the campaign, and we want to be using that relationship and the platform afforded the National Year of Reading to advocate for the government on key areas of finance and policy reform. One of those areas is around infrastructure, and the National Literacy Trust have been working really closely on this campaign for the last many years, and have just got a commitment from the government to fund a library in every primary school in the country, which we'll be working on delivering over the next 12 months. From a policy side of things, we want to be embedding a culture of reading for pleasure in schools and early years settings. I think we've got a lot of brilliant work on phonics and literacy, and that should and must continue, but we want that to be supported by a culture of purely reading for joy as well, because we think that is critical in fostering imagination and supporting longer term literacy as well. And then funding, we'll also be pushing for more funding to schools, libraries, and community institutions that focus on reading, because we know that those community groups are at the heart of ensuring that the legacy of the campaign is able to run beyond 2026. So that's for now. Kate, would you like to take a brief pause now, or should we go straight through?
I think we could probably go straight through to the next.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Then
Yeah.
I'll pass over to Jason.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks everyone for taking the time. My name is Jason. I've worked for the National Literacy Trust for coming up to 14 years now, and most of that time I have led our place-based working. So for more than a decade, we have developed an approach we call a literacy hub. This is not a building. The hub is the network of partners, of community volunteers, and of organisations in high priority places all around the country. And it's the approach that we have developed over that time that has informed a lot of the work that we have put into the National Year of Reading on the ground. If we go to the next slide, please, David. Just to give you a quick idea of where and why and how we work, and I think everybody in this group will understand the importance of focusing limited resources where the need is greatest. You've got on one side there the map showing the IMD, so the indices of multiple deprivation, and the other side is a map you probably haven't seen. This has been created for us by the company Experian, which you may have heard of, who are experts in data, actually, although most people know them for their financial information, credit rating and mortgages. What you can see is a crossover where the areas of highest vulnerability to low literacy cross over with deprivation. Now, that isn't probably a surprise to anybody here, but our charity's approach is that we have to tackle low literacy being reborn into each generation. And for us, literacy is the broadest possible definition. It is speaking, listening, reading, writing, everything we need to communicate who we are, what we value, and to engage in society. We also know that reading is the most universal form of cultural expression and the entry point that most people have to celebrating and championing culture. If we go to the next slide. This gives you an idea of where we are currently focused. So the two in pink, Belfast and Southwark, don't exist yet. The others are our literacy hubs. So in each of those on the ground, we have two members of staff, one who focuses on partnership engagement and building relationships, and the other who focuses on connecting with communities and engaging our volunteer network. We call them literacy champions, and about 74% of them come from an IMD ward in the bottom 10 to 30%. So they are people who have the right lived experience, in inverted commas. They connect with communities. They are credible voices. And our role on the ground is to support them to support their own communities. So this is the range of places where we already are. And then we have a small central team that supports those happening on the ground. So if they are crossing over with your areas afterwards, do get in touch if you want to work with us longer term. On the next slide then, this is what we've done for the National Year of Reading. So you can still just about see the hubs on there in blue. You will get the slides round later, you can zoom in. But we've then identified a further 50 areas across the country where we are focusing the effort and the time and the resources that we have for the National Year of Reading. We've picked those areas, as you can see on the slide, based on the need profile, looking at IMD, looking at attainment, and trying to cover as much of the country as possible. The National Year of Reading is not what the National Literacy Trust does. The National Year of Reading is an invitation for everyone to find a way that reading supports the aims they have, the communities they want to work with, and really helps to tackle some of those issues that David highlighted. But we wanted to give you an idea of the spread and the range that we have. But going back to something else David said, it's not just can we do some projects here or there? Can we find some partners and some volunteers in a location? It really has to be, how do we build a movement that is going to last beyond 2026? And that is a role that all of you have to play in that if you would like to. Next slide. He says, hopefully. I wanted to give you an idea of what we mean by place-based work. So because of this group and the value that you place on the place-based methodology, in each of those areas, they are, of course, all different. Inner city Manchester is very different to Hastings on the coast, and neither of those are the same as Dundee. And what we try and do as a charity trying to support 20 place-based projects from the centre is to have a basic model that is very flexible. So at the heart of it is our community engagement groups. These are people who live in the priority wards in these areas and who come together sometimes formally, often informally. There might be a few who just have a coffee with the Lit Champs officer because they don't want to come into a formal meeting. But they are people who inform our strategy, who help us to understand what you can't find out from the data, and who really help to shape our work and inform what is going to work in an area and for the people we want to work with. Part of our role is to bring together strategic steering groups, so decision makers, policy makers, funders, and a lot of our role there is partly to report to them what we're doing, but also to make sure that we are platforming and representing the communities we work with, either finding ways that they have an opportunity to speak directly or to represent them when they don't want to do that. And we also rely on expertise. So the operations group allows us to bring in frontline experts. So in an area, we might have a focus for a couple of years around children who are in care, for example. There, of course, we need more specialists. So in all of our hubs, in all of those 20 areas, we bring together these different groups that actually allow an effective place-based response that gives equal respect and prominence to different types of experience and expertise, and we hold that together to achieve change. A few more slides and then we'll head towards our break before we go into a bit more detail on the ground. I do want to give you a little bit of the data because one of the questions really has to be, what works? Is it working? Why are you doing what you are doing? So we can go to the next slide then. This comes from the annual literacy survey. So it's annual. It's a survey and it's about literacy because, you know, good on data, bad on names. What you have in front of you is the results from about, in last year, 114,000 young people. And we asked them quite a lot of questions about what do they read, where do they do it, who are their role models. And what you can see is that over the last 5 years, we've had a consistent decline, the one David mentioned, in enjoyment of reading. And that really matters because we know that enjoyment leads to frequency, leads to ability, leads to confidence. And literacy is an absolutely critical underpinning for physical health, for mental well-being, for confidence, likelihood to vote, a whole range of social factors that we think contribute to a better society. In the last year, we've had a small positive increase. So this data comes from the very start, the cusp of the National Year of Reading, but we want to see this trend continue, and you can find the full details of the report if you're interested. But it's some green shoots, it's starting to improve, but what we're going to go on to talk about is why we've got an even better story to tell in those hubs where we work long term. Next slide, please. This is one just to say that actually what's interesting though is that we've still got a slight fall in the youngest age group. And for people in the literacy sector, this would be really surprising because the 5 to 8 year age group are the ones most likely to be positive about literacy and reading. So we've got a real challenge there in terms of what is appealing to the youngest children and what has changed for them. Next slide. And this is actually the second big surprise, the reverse surprise, which is that the biggest improvement has been among teenagers. So the 14 to 16 and 16 to 18 age group. Now, it's still not as high as that younger age group, but actually we are seeing that teenage group saying they enjoy reading more. And we're not exactly sure why. We know that that age group has more decision making. They might have their own money to spend. We know that things like comics, graphic novels, TV tie-ins, those actually have increased over the last few years. We also know, though, that young people really care about their mental well-being and mental health. And they tell us that reading is one of the most important ways that they respond to that. And that is very important in that teenage group. Next slide. The big worry for us, and I expect for everybody though, is that the free school meal gap has continued to widen. We know that poverty and deprivation affect all things that a person can access in their life, from educational outcomes, cultural experience, disposable income has that real effect. Reading is pretty universal, but we are worried about addressing this gap, and creative and exciting ways that tap into it, tapping back into go all in, into passion, starting with what people like and getting literacy and reading into places people are already going. So there's the lowest possible barrier is what the National Year of Reading is all about. And we know what is needed to address that change. Next one. This is the one we're really pleased about from our side. What you can see there is a comparison between the results from those hubs across the top, those highest priority areas where there is the most deprivation compared to England. And what we see is that the children and young people we've worked with long term through our place-based project with volunteers, community partners, local schools, cultural organisations report that they enjoy reading more in their free time, at school, they read more often, and they use their public library more. So this is trend data that we've had over the last 3 years telling us the same thing. It is a vindication of place-based working, and we know all of the good things that happen when literacy and reading enjoyment improves. And that's why we are taking as much as we can of our place-based learning into the National Year of Reading. Next slide. And this is one for those people heavily involved in education. We as a charity do not have a massive focus on attainment for its own sake. But what this is showing you is that actually looking at a set of about 54 primary schools, again, in the high priority areas versus England, we have got a really significantly faster improvement in the Key Stage 2 results. That's the end of primary school reading results. So again, this is telling us that actually where you trust that people in an area know what works for them, that you put power into the hands of communities, that you work with volunteers, and most importantly, you follow what people are already interested in. The local football team backing reading is far more important than a national charity or organisation. Putting things into the local shopping centre where families going matter more. A reading activity in a park where families are spending time is far more meaningful than putting it into a classroom. So this again helps to demonstrate the impact that our work can have. And I've got just a couple more slides and then your break is ahead of you. This one. Now, this is telling us about what families are saying about how regularly they engage with various cultural venues. This data set is quite small, so we're not publishing this one in the way we do the rest of our work. This is one we need to build. But what it is telling us is that actually, as we work with families and communities, as we position reading and literacy, actually confidence to engage in a whole array of community and cultural settings increases. Some of this is actually supported because our volunteers literally will run activities in cultural venues. They will invite families in who they know, and those families might be visiting for the very first time. So sometimes it's about opening a door or building a bridge for a family to engage with cultural opportunities. And sometimes it's our team working with those cultural opportunities to change what the offer is that they have, always driven and led by what our communities tell us they want and need. So we need to do more work in this area, but this is really encouraging as well. And the last section just on the writing results. So as well as the reading, which was the main slides that we've seen so far, we also look at writing and writing habits and have a look at the full report. It is really important. If we jump straight to the next slide, David, one of the things that we know is that as writing improves, as well as reading, we know that actually that is a really important creative outlet for people. We know that children on free school meals are much more likely to say that they write in their own time than their more affluent peers. They're also more likely to read and write poetry and read and write song lyrics. Writing is actually one of the most important forms of personal and therefore cultural expression. There we are. So that's the stat at the top really to take away from this if you don't. Daily. I think my connection has a problem, so I'm going to stop there and let us head to our break.
Thanks so much. I'm just going to make myself big and thank you so much, Jason, and thank you, David. Yes, there was just a slight blip there, Jason, but I think it picked up twice, so hopefully that's been resolved. Right, so it's now 22:03. So if we meet back at, is it right, for 10 to 3? So 2:50, 10 minutes to grab a drink, stretch your legs and come back and we'll hear from Daniel in Barrow. Thank you so much. See you shortly. Welcome back, everybody. Just waiting for you to come back in at 10 to. I'll just add a spotlight to Daniel. And
tell me when you want me, Kate.
I will, yeah, I'll remove the spotlight for Jason. You're ready to start now. So hello and welcome back, everybody. Daniel Tyler McTighe from Barrowville, which is a Creative People and Places, is going to talk to us a little bit about what the Year of Reading looks like up in Barrow.
Well, thanks, Kate, and everybody. Yeah, so we're going from the sort of national picture to very specific example of how we're working in our place, a medium town at the end of the longest cul-de-sac in Britain, as it's been called in the past, I think, Cumbria. So as Kate mentioned, we're a Creative People and Places programme. Just for anybody on the call who might not know what that is, we're one of 46 places in England that receive Arts Council funding. They're all places of least engagement statistically in arts and culture. So our three jobs are to increase excellent arts and culture engagement. The second one, which I think is the most important, is about community decision making and community power within that process. And then the third thing we do is that we're an action research programme across England. So all 46 of us come together to learn from each other's practice and connections and feed that back into the system. So we are Barrowville in Barrow-in-Furness doing those three things. So when National Year of Reading was announced and we talked to partners there, our community advisors looked at our program for 2026 that was actually already existed, so was already a thing, and we looked at basically how we could put those two things on top of each other and where are the synergies, where are the links, and the themes really. I'm just going to take you through projects this year where we've managed to integrate National Year of Reading kind of activity. As Jason was saying before, it's that integration of reading into a kind of general cultural life. So for us, it's about the joy of arts and culture more widely, but reminding people that words, writing and reading are there too. And I suppose a good thing for us has been a focus on those different ways of reading, whether it's subtitles on a Korean TV show on Netflix, or whether it's reading about football has been given example, that kind of thing. So I suppose the way we've been able to champion the campaign and reading in general is it's that phrase of soft power. We're never really there sort of bashing people over the head with books, but it's what can we do within our work across the year to encourage people in this area. And something David said about people doing things together, that idea of reading being a really solitary thing. So we've been looking for ways that, as an arts and culture organisation, we bring a lot of people together. 3 times a year we have a big event with thousands of people. Every week we bring groups of 20 to 30 people together for different things. So it's how we can inject or encourage reading within that. And also, I suppose, another theme that's really come through for us is that really important link between reading and writing. I saw a thing on Instagram, I don't know if it's one of those like inspirational quotes or actually if somebody very clever said it, which is breathing in is reading and breathing out is writing. It's relevant whether it's just a tea towel quote or whether it's somebody very clever who said it. So there's the integration into our program, which I'll take you through the examples, and we've got some pretty pictures. And just sort of blitzing the town with free books, which has been great to do in collaboration with the National Literacy Trust and National Year of Reading. So that's not just sort of World Book Day books for young people, but actually books for their parents to read, and just to kind of give that initial introduction or reintroduction to having a book in your hand. So here are some projects. In February, we did a huge overarching festival called Starlight by the Barrow, which had 13 projects within it. But 2 of them that are particularly relevant. One was called Lucky Stars, which was an evening of community cabaret of all sorts of performance. But it saw our older people's creative group reading and performing Shakespeare, writing their own scripts, and picking apart lyrics to famous songs, nursery rhymes, well-known things like that. And these are the examples that have already been mentioned in the campaign kind of illustration we've had already in this call. Written by the Stars was much more about writing, but it was about local people being given a chance to write their own poetry about stars and starlight. But within that process, there was a lot of reading of other famous things and reading each other's work and reading their own work to edit it. So it's sometimes about drawing attention to people to the fact that they are, how important reading is within that process, but they're actually there because they want to try out writing. So that was those 2 projects. We did our multicultural celebration of spring, which we've been doing for 5 years now. And within that, we tried to, again, sort of just integrate things and highlight wherever possible the written word and different ways to engage with it. So theatre, the poet, sea poet Eric Ndube from the West Midlands, comic artists creating comic books with participants. And on the same day, and in partnership with us, Lakes International Comic Art Festival and the local BID ran an event mainly for teenagers and young adults, but for everybody really, called Barrow Does Comics, which was a kind of town-wide celebration of comic books, graphic novels, and all of that involved. So again, that idea of just being integrated in our normal program, but wherever possible, steering things in that direction a bit more can be seen. And then it heats up. So our next big events, which are in August, are playcations. These every summer are free. What are they called? Free, family-friendly, creative mini festivals with games, theatre, musical fun. And we've made the theme this year wordplay. That ranges from theatre. It's the theatre piece we've got. One of the theatre pieces we've got is a blend of circus and Hamlet, and circus and Peter Rabbit, and other kind of literary texts. But we're doing all sorts of playing around with words, which involves reading as you go along, and sort of all different takes on that. Our older people's creative group that I mentioned are performing scenes from Alice in Wonderland in huge inflatable luminariums that are coming to visit as well. So this, with the placations, we really explicitly said we want to play with words, and again we want to give away free books. And there's a sort of literary quest where families will read specially written clues, kind of rhyming couplet clues written by a local writer, that send them to different parts of the park where they discover an object from a famous book, whether that's Winnie the Pooh's Honey Pot or one of the Horcruxes from Harry Potter or those kind of things. Once you've solved the quest, you then get prizes, which include book tokens, even more free books, bookmarks, and all of that kind of stuff. So a very active way to enjoy reading together in a park with your family and get a bit of a prize at the end of it. In October and November, we're celebrating Barrow's first Day of the Dead. And this, again, has been in partnership with the National Year of Reading, who have worked with us to bring a storyteller along to tell tales from Mexico. We've got a project, the picture of the, quite interesting in that picture. Ruth Mary Johnson is a theatre maker, writer, all sorts of things, strings to her bow. She's doing a project with grandparents and grandchildren about writing down the stories that have never been written down, but that have been created between generations or been created in playing in the garden or at the playground. So that will form a blossoming book of stories and a garden of stories over the year. And we're having workshops on calaveritas, and I speak Spanish as well, literarius, which are, I don't want to do any injustice, so Google them, but basically they're sort of satirical poems about how the people in your life might die. In Mexican schools, school children are often encouraged to write them about their teachers. The one rule is you can't write them about anybody who's already dead because they can't defend themselves. But when I've kind of explained it to people locally, in terms of the satire and the tongue-in-cheek nature, it's kind of like limericks for us. But yeah, it's thinking about how those around us might perish and writing a funny poem about that. So we're having workshops on that, which is great. And then other ways to just scaffold in, really, so that it doesn't have to always be about reading long texts or enjoying long sentences. So even with papel picado, which is the beautiful way of decorating the sort of bunting that they have for the celebration, and looking at what words can be learned from the Spanish language through reading, through being taught, and then through the artwork of cutting into the paper. The main day is Sunday, the 1st of November, which then knocks into the National Literacy Trust Non-Fiction November. So we're looking at the moment at what kind of educational or documentary content about Mexico and its cultures can be kind of wrapped up into that, so that there is that other side of things that's not just about all the creative stuff. The final project I'll tell you about, which spills into 2027, but as we've said, it's the campaign and the spirit behind it isn't going to end at the end of December 2026. So with our partners, Lakes International Comic Art Festival, who have been instrumental in and lead on the fact that Barrow's been named the UK's first comic book town, we're creating an exchange project, a creative exchange project between young people at South Walney Junior School, which is an island of Barrow that's just off in the Irish Sea, and an international school in Tokyo in Japan. And they will share workshops with quite high-profile British and Japanese comic artists they'll enjoy existing and kind of seminal comics between them and respond to them, but they'll actually co-create their own new comic book stories across the globe with digital help, of course, because we can't fly all of them everywhere. So those are the projects that I wanted to showcase and tell you about as an example of how things are happening in our place to try and encourage and work in partnership with National Year of Reading and to help the campaign prosper. That's me done. Thanks.
Wonderful. Ooh, I'm just going to show my face. Thank you so much, Daniel. That's a jam-packed year ahead, and it's great to hear about the poems of perishment um, and how you're looking at different culture and languages to really ignite inspiration. Yeah, that's fabulous. Would anybody at this point like to ask any questions for Daniel?
There's one in the chat, and I was just going to say I do actually have to leave soon. So if anybody had any questions after, I could put in touch with you, Kate. But it says, curious to know why you chose it. So I should have said even more clearly at the start. So everything, all of our program is thought up and dreamt up and guided by our community members. And for a few years now, they've been requesting a Day of the Dead. We don't have a large Mexican community locally, but it's something that's caught the attention of Barovians, people living here, and they've asked for it. So we're working with Mexican artists who are living in the UK, and some from Mexico, some from Dublin, for them to kind of curate it authentically. And then we're also responding in those other ways. So the grandparents and grandchildren project is not about Mexican culture. It's more about the relationship between the generations and stories that pass between them. So we're kind of riffing off the day, but also having a big Mexican hoopla on the 1st of November as well.
Thanks. Thank you, Daniel. Does anyone else have any questions for Daniel before he has to leave? Yun has responded and said, wonderful to hear. I am based in Newcastle. I am Mexican and I'm going to do something to celebrate Day of the Dead here in Newcastle. Would be great to connect to share ideas. Thank you, Yun. I'm sure Daniel would be delighted.
Yeah, I'll put our website in the chat and feel free to email me.
Great. Thank you. And does anyone have any questions as well for Jason and David? I was just going to ask a question to start off anyway, because I was thinking about the kind of digital versus physical act of reading, and wondered if there's any statistics about which one's more has better known outcomes for kind of health and social and education, or are they both absolutely great? And it's just whichever one's more accessible to you.
Yeah, I'll take that one as a starter. So the research basically says that both are good. All forms and formats are great. What we've found is that actually digital formats are especially good for disengaged readers. Some of the work that has been done has looked at a very kind of straightforward split of looking at boys and girls as two particular groups you can look at within studies, and found that boys were more likely to start reading on digital devices, but who would describe themselves as reluctant readers, and then go on. And there's a few things behind it. One is very practical, ability to change size, change lighting. It can just be more accessible. The other thing is, on a digital device, people can't see what you're reading. So for somebody who isn't confident in their reading skill, maybe has lower skills, it's much easier to do that rather than be seen reading a book that might be perceived as, too low for your age and all of that kind of thing. And there is also the fact that you can use it to look around a topic as well. Just, the pronunciation of word, the definition, that kind of thing. So our general message is all forms and formats are great. unmediated use of technology by children and young people is generally not great. So parental and family involvement, role models, all of those things really matter. But really big fans of all forms of creativity when it comes to writing and reading and form and format.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jason. And are there any other questions? Feel free to pop them into the chat.
And maybe if helpful, I could just touch on how we think about legacy for the campaign, because even though we're only halfway through or just over halfway through, and we've got ambitious sets of plans for the rest of the year with a focus on early years families and early years reading in September, and a focus on mental health and well-being in October, and Christmas giveaways in December, we really are thinking a lot about legacy and what that looks like. And I guess the kind of four main areas we're thinking about for that is first, a kind of maintenance of the Goal In public facing campaign. As I mentioned at the start, I think we're all aware that we're not going to do the in-depth sustained behavior change we want to see in just 11 and a half months of campaigning. We really need this to be ongoing. And we think the Goal In brand, which is accessible to different organizations, different individuals, can be adapted for different purposes, is really valuable. And we want to maintain that and continue that and continue to encourage that behavior change. So I think a maintenance of the brand and an ongoing consumer facing campaign on reading is really important. I think second is partnerships. As I mentioned at the start, we've got about 900 organizations signed up, committed to support the campaign and deliver. And the example we just had there from Daniel is a perfect one of how it is being integrated and delivered and made contextually relevant all around the UK. We want those partnerships to continue beyond 2026. We don't want organizations to be thinking, okay, what's the next year? What's the next focus? What's the next priority? We've started a brilliant movement here and we want to maintain those organizations and by providing ideas, inspiration, toolkits, support, exactly as Sarah's been doing with Daniel and others across the north of England, to be keeping them engaged and mobilised in the campaign. So a strand around partnerships. Third is advocacy. So we are being evaluated by an independent evaluator who is looking at what's working in the campaign, for who, where, and why. And that's an organisation called Impact Ed are doing that analysis, and they'll be coming out with findings and recommendations at the end or early next year in March time. And we want to use that platform to be advocating for the lessons of the campaign, be that with government, be that with other funders, community organisations, and our delivery partners. What are the real key lessons we're taking away from this brilliant range of activity, and how can we champion them even further, both in the UK and internationally? And then lastly, will be a push for some kind of specific project-based interventions which we think are needed and kind of gaps in the sector. And an example of this I touched on earlier was the Libraries for Primaries programme. We've seen there's a huge gap in terms of library infrastructure in primary schools, and we've made a big push to advocate for that to be filled. There will be other significant infrastructural gaps that this campaign helps expose or spotlights that this NLT or one of our delivery partners is working on, that we want to be then supporting them to kind of build and strengthen that infrastructure. So that's kind of roughly how we're thinking about the key areas of focus for legacy right now.
Thank you, David. That's extremely thorough, and it's good to hear about a little bit about the legacy and advocacy going forward. And it's also brilliant to hear about it being a movement as well going forward. And Jason, when you mentioned as well that how the connection with the kind of place-based working, so you can see that evidence now where with the improvements, the quite significant improvements where they're kind of literacy hubs across the country. That's really reassuring. Oh, we have Sarah. Sorry,
I was going to
Sarah.
say I was going to call Sarah in because her and her team are leading on a
just
lot of this as well. So.
Please do, Sarah. I'll just spotlight you as well so we can see you nice and clear.
Yeah, so I was just going to share a few. Okay, great. Yeah, I was just to share a few examples of how we I'm the regional lead for the north of England for the National Year of Reading, and so I have been reaching out to loads of different organisations and communities across.
You're coming in and out quite a lot for everyone, I think.
North.
So maybe if you went off video, that might help with the bandwidth.
And so
I think Sarah, it's just buffering.
Yeah, I not to speak for Sarah, so I'll pick up a couple of bits that I think she was going to say. So Sarah is one of 3 regional leads across England, and they each have people who are working locally, so trying to cover those 50 areas that I mentioned briefly. And it's everything from supporting existing local festivals and activities, recruiting volunteers in their own areas. So those literacy champions I mentioned are not just in hubs, but building them out, and also looking at organisations that are going to be there in the long term. So people like Tees Active, for example, up in the northeast, they've done a lot of work with Sarah and her team. Things like putting library shelves and library sign-up points in leisure centres. Making sure that actually the reading ecosystem is where people are going, because we know from a lot of behaviour change, if we want people to read who aren't already, tap into what they're interested in. So in that case, sport and what they're doing, put it somewhere where they're comfortable and confident, so they're more likely to listen to a new message, or put it somewhere where it surprises them. And any of those things means that people then think about it in a different way. It stays in their head, and somebody is more likely to do it. And what Sarah and her team have really been working on is how do we make sure it thrives in terms of providing an amount of kind of leadership, but leadership that catalyzes. So it's not about being there permanently, it's about supporting local leadership, making sure that it's community led, bringing partners together, drawing on all the data. National Literacy Trust has 30 years of data and research and survey. It's no good to anyone unless it's used. So we want to make sure it's available to as many people as possible to use it to be really effective, and make sure that we tap into the assets and opportunities in every area. So I think they were some of the things Sarah was going to say, but do drop us a line and we will connect you to the people in your region if you want to follow up further.
That's really helpful, Jason. I imagine a number of people on the call will be wanting to connect with their hub managers. So thank you for that. And I'm just sorry that we couldn't hear from you directly, Sarah, just the connection. And I hope it's not my end, but we'll investigate to see why that's happening today, because it's just slight blips. But thank you, Jason, for giving a summary. If there aren't any other questions, we can stop there today, and we will, as I said, the session is recorded, so we'll send you the link. You can share, you can watch at your leisure, and there'll also be the slides from today, so you can look at those at your leisure. And please get in touch with myself so I can link you in with David and with Jason and with Sarah and the other team members from in terms of the hub managers. There's nothing else to add. I'm just going to quickly ask for those on the call. We would be delighted if you could fill in a very, very short poll. I'm going to just open it up now. This just gives us a view about, the session today, but also what you'd like to see in future. So it should take you a minute at the most. I'll just launch that. I hope you can all see that. And while you're filling that in, I just want to say a big, big thank you for David, for Sarah, for Jason, for giving us, and Daniel. Sorry, Daniel's left the call, but for bringing the Go All In. the National Year of Reading 2026 to life and to give us a little taste of what it can look like in your area, in your place. But also a big shout out as well to our two amazing interpreters, Claire and Claire. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and
Yes.
again, if there's any questions, please drop us a line. We'll put you in the right direction.
That's
Thank you.
great.
Thank you, everyone, and have a
Thanks,
lovely
everyone. Take care now.
afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.